Hey everyone, I'm Neil Turetti. Welcome to another episode of the Daily Wisdom Words podcast, where we talk to people every week who have stories, advice, and life hacks, all of which take you one step closer to that feeling of hope.
Hello everyone, I'm your guest co-host filling in for Maureen O'Day, Tiana G. Hansen, and today we are joined by one of my lovely friends, Tara Harbert. I hope I'm pronouncing that right.
You are.
Okay. Good. And you may know her as the Tender-Hearted Healer on Instagram.
That is I. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you for joining.
Yeah, thanks for doing this. This has been our viewers won't know this, but we have been rescheduling, it feels like forever. So we're so glad that we could finally do this. But yeah, thank you for coming on.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's so exciting. So when Neil offered me to just ask whoever I felt, I was like, well, I definitely want to talk to Tara because I am in a class with you right now called Consciousness Accelerator, which is really wonderful. And I was like, I need to pick her brain some more. So
pick away. Let's go.
Challenge accepted. I guess we'll just jump right in here. I'm not used to really running the questions, so forgive me. So I know that you do a lot of heart-centered work, and anyone else who's familiar with you. And I guess I first want to know where you got the name Tender-Hearted Healer, and also what attracts you to the heart chakra.
Absolutely. Well, the Tender-Hearted Healer came from, honestly, it was like a workshopping process. I was like, I just want to, there's something else that I want to identify with, that I do identify with. And I started putting all these words on paper, and it was hearted, chakra, tender, all these things. And I just remember, so when I was a kid, my mom always called her tender pink angel. And I became just the tender person of the family. I am the tender person of the family, not the only, but that was my identity. And so when I put all these names in kind of a list, and I was just playing with words, I was tender-hearted, that's me. That's who I am. That's the essence of me. So that's where I created that. But ever since I was a kid, there's just been this tenderness about me. And for a lot of my life, I had a lot of shame around that. I thought that, my tenderness was something to kind of be embarrassed about. And I had all these people telling me I'm too sensitive, I'm too this, I'm too that, I'm too loud, I'm too blah, blah, blah. And so the list would go on. And I, over the years, took it on as my identity to actually be tough and strong and brave. And I didn't want people to think that I was going through something. I wanted them to look at me and say wow, Tara has her stuff together, good for her. And so I didn't want my identity to be, oh, poor Tara. So I overcompensated. And it wasn't until years later. So within just the past couple of years, I had an epiphany at a meditation I was doing. I was like, wait a minute, why have I been so ashamed of this my whole life? And when I was going through my healing practitioner course, we focused on all the chakras, but we spent a good amount of time on the heart. And to say the floodgates opened is an understatement, because the question that she asked me, I even remember what it was in class, but I just started to sob, and it felt like years of just shit that came up, stuff that came up. I hope I can cuss. Stuff that came. Okay, good. Stuff that came up, that my soul and my body was just purging. And I just started to become aware and see how many people like myself, especially women, who deal with this on a consistent basis. You're too emotional. Don't be emotional. You're hysterical. Don't do this. Don't blah, 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 blah. And all these confines we place around ourselves in terms of our sensitivity. And I realized, wait, why do I feel shame for being this? Why do I have to feel like I need to be what everyone else is? Is it maybe the other way around, that they should be more like me? And that helped, that question, that narrative kind of helped reduce some of that shame. So that's where my journey with the tenderheartedness came from, embracing sensitivity and saying a big F off to anybody who tries to tell me otherwise.
Yeah.
What does it mean to you to live that open-hearted life?
That's a good question. You know, I didn't even like hear a word. I just saw like this big expanded light just shooting out of my chest like a Care Bear stare. So it's like a Care Bear stare from my heart-centeredness, for lack of a better description. It's freedom. It's just release. It's feeling love for yourself, but also feeling love for the world around you, and feeling love for your boundaries, and feeling love for your self-respect, and being compassionate with yourself. But yeah, I like the image of the Care Bear stare. It's a Care Bear stare from my heart.
Yeah. You do have like that strong, open-hearted essence, and I always feel it whenever I'm working with you or just watching even reels. She has wonderful reels on her Instagram.
You know, when I'm putting out that light, right, you attract that. And of course you get mosquitoes that want to feed off your light a little bit and just want to, you know, snatch away. But for the most part, that light really brings in other heart-centered light individuals who want to express that love. So,
and yes, this is
you
like
mentioned well, I was just going to very quickly, you said that there are going to always be those haters, right? Even if it's whether it's sometimes small populations, sometimes. How do you deal with that, and what would you advise others who want to go on a similar path to just being letting go of their inhibition? What would you advise them to for those mosquitoes, like you said, who might criticize or be haters or trolls or whatever name you want? Yeah.
That's a really good question. There's so many different things that can be done, but it starts with a strong centering of self. And honestly, it comes from, I always teach my clients to start with your values. Like, what are your core values? What are your non-negotiables in life? And what are the things like safety, respect, trust? What are those things that you're like not willing to waver on, that you really want to set as the foundation of you? Because oftentimes we know, like, okay, well, yeah, I want to have money to pay my bills, but like the underneath that, like, okay, get more specific with that. Like, what does that look like? Create a clear vision. And that, through the building of self, helps to really, you know, understand, like, okay, I have this clear vision of what I want to be for me. So the hate and the mosquitoes and all that crap is not going to go away. But when you can create a better, for lack of a better description, like a tunnel vision into your future and what it is that you want to create, that helps tremendously. But like, you know, I always say, it takes a great deal of diligence. It takes practice. I still have days where I'm like, oh my God, that person said this, you know, about me or to me. And, you know, I just have to take it in and say, okay, this, what they said. And when I say take it in, I understanding that, yes, it's hurting, but it's not who I am. Do I identify with that statement? No. And so acknowledging that it hurt, but also acknowledging that it's not my identity. And that's been the hardest part, but it's worth it, right? And we're all human, not taking away the humanistic quality of ourselves that we still possess, you know, moments of sadness and darkness and heaviness. But honestly, I think, yeah, it's really truly going back to those values of what is your foundation of you, and that helps.
That just hit home so much with
me. I mean,
that was that was a good question.
Tiana will tell you that, thank you, that's a phrase I use all the time, sometimes ad nauseam. Probably that people is being human. Every time I make a mistake, or if someone else tells me I'm really having a hard time, and I always tell them, like, oh, so you're just being human. That's cool. Go be human for a while.
Go be human. I love that. Go be human. Yeah, and I try to stay away from using the phrase normal, because what the hell is normal anyway? And normal, I think normal doesn't exist. Yeah. So go be human. Yeah, it humanizes, because when we take, you know, normal versus not normal, it creates this or that divide. It creates a separation. But when you say just human, like, it creates this togetherness. Like, we all, you know, we all are, in the three of us, different people, but we have same kind of humanistic experiences and responses to things. So that creates a more just unity and grace.
One of our first discovery call, you did this powerful higher meditation. So can you talk a little bit about your relationship with your intuition and your higher self and how that helps you?
That's a great question. Yeah. So the higher self, when people hear that phrase, sometimes it's like, what? That sounds a little too woo-woo, but it's like, I like to describe it as, it's the version of yourself, the version that you want to be, free from like, oh, I want to lose 10 pounds. I want to have blonde hair. It's the mental, spiritual, like more aligned version of you. So like creating that, like, okay, I see her, she's more focused, she's grounded, she's clear, she's confident, and just visiting what that version of yourself would look like. What does it feel like? How is she standing? What is she doing? So that you can start to see a vision of her, but also when you're doing that, you start to integrate that into your body so you know what it feels like. And so that feeling of having it here in your heart, or having it in your throat, having it in your stomach area, starts to, over time, give you signals and cues like, oh, that reminds me of when I felt that higher version self. I'm going to go down that direction. But it's really hard. Intuition can be really hard to do when you're so used to not listening to yourself. So if you have very strong people-pleasing tendencies or perfectionistic tendencies, what we do when we're brought up in a household that maybe didn't let us honor ourselves or our boundaries or our feelings, we then look out and see, okay, well, none of what I do matters, so I have to focus on everyone else. And so we stop listening to our body. We stop listening to anything that, might cue us. And so what this work does is helping you to shut off this outside perspective a little bit, come back into the self and working on what it is to listen. So I always go, it starts with the body. You feel in your body things often before you even consciously understand, like, oh, I'm feeling mad, right? You start to get that tension in your chest. Maybe your fists are, clenching like that. You start to grind your teeth a little bit, and then you say, I'm mad. But your body gives you that cue. So working on your intuition is paying attention more to, okay, I feel really happy. I feel it in my chest here, and I feel it in my stomach. Okay, cool. So when I feel mad, it's the opposite of that. So you can start to just become better at gauging your body. And I think we're all born with incredibly intuitive gifts, but over time we learn to suppress them. And it's just how to, over time, re-engage that process.
I was going to ask, like, how do you differentiate between your intuition, your true intuition, and your inner critic, which might be pessimistic and telling you don't do that? How do you, because I know that that's something that for many years I went through personally. I was like, okay, is this a sign, or am I just being pessimistic, or is this me because so many people told me it's not worth doing this, don't do it, you'll never succeed? Am I just integrating that and thinking it's my intuition? So do you have any tips for like differentiating the two voices?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I read something in a book recently that it was like, when you are dealing with something that is fear-based, you feel that like that fearfulness that like, I can't do it. You feel that anger, you feel that kind of like caving inward. It creates this like, you want to just kind of curl up in a ball and go in the corner. But when you're following your intuition, it feels light. It feels like, the phrase comes to mind, I don't know why I want to do this, but I'm going to do it anyway. So you don't have any true like logic, even though you don't understand what that logic is. So it just feels a little bit lighter. It feels clearer. You don't feel so like, oh, torn back and forth. So I have my clients work on the fuck yes or fuck no theory. And it helps to develop the intuitive sense, which moves you away from that kind of that second guessing, the inner critic part. And like, so I always have my clients start small. Like, for instance, this is my second cup of decaf coffee this morning, but I had to ask myself this morning, before this interview, do I feel like I have the capacity to, make the coffee, and do I want to drink that? And my body was like, yeah, fuck yes. And I was like, great. Okay, great. But like, for instance, I've stopped drinking alcohol as much as I used to way in the past. And so going through that process was, do I feel like I can handle this tonight? And I would just sit still and just listen to my body for a minute. No, it said, fuck no. And so it's hard again when you're first starting this, because instinctually you may not know what it is to feel that in your body, but just listening, you know, when we feel something exciting, right? We're like, oh my God, fuck yes. And then we start to second guess that, right? We're like, oh, but you can't do that. You're not smart enough, blah, 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 blah. And there's all these things that knock us down. It's that initial yes, or that initial like, ooh, no, that you should pay attention to. And maybe, and, you know, acknowledging too, a no right now does not mean that it's a no in the future. It could be just, it's a no right now. And that's important. And even if you're still facing that fear and that critic, that's okay. But acknowledging that something's coming up and saying, is this truly a fuck no? Or is this really because like, I'm really scared as hell? And that's important to recognize and not shame yourself for that. Okay, I'm scared as hell. All right. Okay, what can I do to be less scared as hell? Does that make sense?
Totally.
Cool.
I love that, actually. Yeah, it clears up so much. So, yeah.
Good.
Brought up that fuck yes, fuck no. And actually, I was like screaming, Tara, last night, because I was in one of my other courses, the Sensual Somatics, and she was leading us through the embodiment of no. And how, and she mentioned how, and it was a body embodied no, maybe, or yes. And she mentioned how, this is Desi Monique, and she said that we're all kind of in like a gray maybe. So we don't really know how to do that. Fuck yes, fuck no.
Yeah.
It's just like, Tara, like, oh my God, like you've taught me how to like just start small with that, because we're like, wait, how do I know if it's a fuck yes, fuck no? You're like, you just have to train your body back into that. Oh,
yeah. That's a good point, that gray maybe-ness. And I usually tell my clients, if you're in that gray maybe-ness, then maybe it is a fuck no. That you're just not in that place to make that decision effectively yet. And that's okay. That's okay. But just knowing that there's maybe some limitations around that.
So what led you to being you, like your life coach business, which you just started off independently, right? You like quit your job and you're like, yes, I'm a full-time life coach. So what was your individual journey there?
So I in my past, in my distant past, have been in some not so good relationships. I've been in a verbally abusive and mentally abusive relationship that weighed a lot on me in terms of my awesomeness and my joy and my love. And so over the years, once I was able to kind of break myself free from that, I started to go down this path that I was like, okay, I'm following this. I don't really identify with religion. I don't really identify with, you know, this structure or that structure. What is my structure? I don't know. I had no idea. And I had an ex who actually had a book on Buddhism on his table. And I was like, oh, that's curious. But that also was kind of like, oh, that's not really speaking to me either, all of it. And so I just started to dive into the question of like, what speaks to me? And this is going to sound funny. I think it's hilarious, but Oprah spoke to me. Like she literally like called to me in one of her TV episodes, and I was watching it and I was like, wow, I feel like this episode is directed like straight towards me. And it was about like all the abuse and like just the things we weigh on ourselves. And it just was this big epiphany. So I started with the basics. Oprah, she had a show called Super Soul Sunday, Brene Brown, reading her book. And I'll never forget, I was reading Brene Brown's Daring Greatly book. And I was sitting with my other not so great ex at the time. And this was in 2013. And I was reading the book about the part about vulnerability. And I was like, I don't even know what that is. I don't know what that is to be vulnerable with myself, with my partner. Like, I don't know. And that relationship wasn't great. And so we ended up parting ways. And once I cut that, like kind of that weight and those ties, it's like this mass flooding of information came in. And I just started saying yes, fuck yes to things that felt good informational wise. And so I've been really hungry and getting my hands on information, of studying with people, of taking, you know, the time to process and digest that information. So it led me down this path to eventually work with a life coach who was like, hey, I think you'll be really good at doing this program. And it was a healing practitioner, energy healer program that I went through. And I was really hesitant at first. It was an investment for myself. And it was just, yeah, money investment, time investment. It was concepts that I wasn't, higher self and stuff like that, that I wasn't used to it. I didn't know what the hell that meant or that would entail. And so I hemmed and hawed over that a long time. And finally, I just signed up for it, not really sure where it was going to take me. And that truly opened up my life. And then we finished that course, and then COVID hit. And I had a massive, what did I just do with my life? Why did I go through this? What the hell am I going to do? Because I had this vision of working with clients, and I didn't know what that was going to look like or what that was going to be. And then so it started off with me just really playing around with tarot, and I still do love tarot. And I started just telling people hey, I'm going to start doing this. And the flood of people that came in was like, oh my God, okay, people are really hungry for this. So I started doing individual sessions, which led to me just figuring out, okay, I like this, but there's more that I should be doing. I hired a business coach, and then that business coach helped me transform my practice so that now I do still offer tarot, but the direction that I'm taking things in is a long-term kind of care, because I think a lot of people come to me with tarot questions that are, and I was finding this, are based in self-love. I don't feel worthy. Should I take this new job because I don't feel like I'm, worthy of having this? Should I trust myself? Should I blah, blah, blah? And all these deep self questions that were so much deeper than just the Tower card said you shouldn't do it. But it was, the understanding of the why behind that and what was underneath that. And so my coaching is getting to the nitty gritty of things rather than just the surface level stuff.
Yeah, I know that one of the things you advocate so much self-love and positivity and all that, but I've also seen your posts on not ignoring your negative emotions, right? And you also talked a little bit about that briefly earlier on in this conversation about, I think you called it, was it ghosting your certain emotions and you shouldn't do that or something I'm trying to think back to the post that you did on Instagram.
Yeah, I know.
What I wanted to know is how and when do you know to cut off that point of sitting with those emotions, sitting with the negative emotions, recognizing them, but not letting them dominate your entire near future?
Yeah. Thank you. That's a great question. And I definitely have been, in my grief journey with losing my dad, have been facing this, what is an appropriate amount of time to be sitting with this? And when is the time to get up and start moving and doing and being? I actually had a therapist who taught me this. She would have me set a timer or give an hour. She would say, okay, if you need to cry, go cry on your lunch break, cry it out, and then tell yourself, okay, after this hour is up, I need to do something that feels good for my soul to relieve myself from this emotion, because living in that for days and days on end is not going to be helpful. And that was actually when my dad passed, that was something that was really helpful to me, because of course there were several days that I was just comatose on the couch, but I would still make sure that I was getting up to set my alarm. Okay, it's time to go take a shower. Go brush your teeth, get up and do something. And so you don't have to deny yourself of weeks and weeks on end of feeling that sadness, but I had to still create, and it's creating that activity, right? It's creating some of that movement, just integrating, because when we're in that state of kind of emotional comatose, there's things that we can do that help bring us out of that. So for me, it was the feeling of the water on my face and my head, and just allowing that heat to be on my body, just to say oh my God, okay, it's going to be okay. It felt kind of like a warm blanket, or, the texture of I have a favorite blanket of mine. So feeling the texture of that blanket, and just, okay, I feel the sensation on my fingers, things that start to bring you out of that gently and softly. But yeah, I really do think setting the kind of the time limitation, all right, you got 20 minutes, scream it out, go get a pillow and just rage, and then go about your day. Because when we do live in that consistently, it creates, I think it can make a situation worse, right? Because you live in your head in that space. Oh my God, life is horrible. I just lost my dad. Things suck. I suck, blah, 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 that narrative. And then it just it spirals into more darkness. So just saying to my husband, I feel like shit today. Can you help me? And also, you know, I am one, like I told you guys both, you know, that feeling of like, I'm strong, I'm independent, I don't want people to think I'm blah, blah, blah. My business coach gave me some really good advice, and she was like, this is the time to show people that there's that other side, that human side of you, that you do struggle as well. And so I made a concerted effort to say, I feel like shit today. Can you help me? I don't know what that help looks like. Okay, let's go get a smoothie. Great. So just taking the small steps to get you out of that space, but not pushing yourself or talking to yourself in a way that isn't helpful, right? It's not, oh my God, you're the worst for taking a day off. No, you're not the worst. You're a human who maybe went through a lot of shit and needs some time to recover from that.
Yeah. And can I offer like an opposite perspective of that?
Yeah.
Because I could so relate to this, because this happened, something similar happened to me when my dad passed away too many years ago. But what for me was, what everybody found a little strange was, after like 3 hours after it happened, paramedics came, blah, 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 whatever. And like, I just went home and started watching like sitcoms, but that was my way of not letting the nightmares, because it happened at night. It was like 8:30 at night or so. We were at it, and I didn't want to go to sleep with the nightmares of what I just experienced. So I thought, okay, I need a distraction, but it wasn't as if I wasn't feeling it, or if it wasn't as if I didn't care, it wasn't affecting me. I didn't want to get to that point of being totally numbed out to where like, okay, I can't do anything, or I have to stop, because I still, you know, I had a job, I had responsibilities, and I didn't want that numbness to sort of take over. But a lot of people found it strange that, wait a minute, how can you be watching TV at it? Shouldn't you be thinking about, and I'm like, I am, but you know, there has to be
in your own way.
Yeah, in all of our individual own ways. So it's just, I could really relate as you were telling that story. It's like, been there. So
I appreciate you sharing that. And thank you for sharing that. And I'm sorry that you know that place, but I hear what you're saying, and you're absolutely right that we have to have a level of distraction in situations like that. That's just being a human. We can't live in that moment all the time. So I'm the same way right now. I tried to actually, my dad passed 4 months ago, and I tried to watch like a heavier kind of dramatic show the other day, and I was like, nope, this is not going to serve me. It's going to make my anxiety go up. I'm shutting it down. So knowing those limitations. And again, that comes back to listening to your body. You listened to your body and said, okay, I need a little bit of joy right now, and that's okay.
Oh my gosh. What a powerful conversation. Like, wow. Yeah. Thank you both for sharing that.
Yeah.
Grief can be so vulnerable, and
I think sorry, go ahead. Yeah. No, I was going to say, I think it's nice to, Neil, like to have these situations, right, where we've never met before, but you and I both share that commonality. And we think like, when we're going through that grief, I am alone. No one else understands it. Yeah. But then you talk we talk and we're like, oh my God, you too? Me too. And so that community aspect also helps bring you out of that heaviness. Like, I know if I spend too much time on my own, I'm going to start like feeling kind of like alone as well. So reaching out to a friend, watching a comedy, if that makes you feel better.
Now that you are into full-time life coaching, and that's what your main sort of endeavor is, area of interest is, how do you balance that out with helping others, but at the same time, not letting it affect your own well-being? Because I think, and this is something, it's not just life coaches or psychologists or counselors, right? We all, in a way, we want to be there for our friends and loved ones when they're feeling down, and we want to comfort them. But it's like they say, at the same time, don't let it affect your own mental health. Don't let them bring you down to a point where it's like, okay, now I can't function, or the rest of my day is going to be crap because I decided to try to help somebody in their hour of need. So how do you strike that balance?
That's a really good question. It's, and again, acknowledging that it's really difficult to do it first, right? It takes practice. And I think a lot of people think, oh my God, if I don't get it right the first time, then I failed and like I should stop trying. It's an active like every kind of day, I still have to go through this too, right? And the saying, the fuck no, but it comes down to, again, I will always advocate for this, listening in your body. There's a fine line between helping someone and then giving yourself away to someone. And when we are helping someone, it's like, oh my God, you feel joy, I feel joy, I was able to help you, you're grateful for that. There's a mutual connection, kind of like this phone call where, we all feel that connection. We're like, yeah, this feels good. I don't feel like I'm giving too much of myself. Hopefully you don't feel that in return. But if the tables were turned, you might start to feel like agitated. You might start to feel like, man, I feel resentful of this conversation. You might still start to feel like fidgety. You might start to feel that like, that you're feeling a little sick to your stomach. And so that body cue is a good way to say like, oh, something's going on. So when we are in the act of people pleasing, we tend to do that, right? And we tend to feel like shit afterwards. So we don't feel that like, oh my God, I feel so thankful. I feel so alive. But even when there's great conflict, if someone calls you like and says, oh my God, I was in an accident, you're not going to be like, oh, do I feel like, no, that call of action is to go help that person that you love. So those situations are a little bit different. But when it comes to, I think it's really important to acknowledge what happens after the fact when you're starting this process, because you're not going to be able to immediately go like, how does my body feel, when you're not used to asking that question. So the consideration is after. Did that feel like a mutual exchange of love and joy and compassion? No. Okay, why? That's a great observation. Okay, because right now I don't have any time to go pick up my kids, and I don't have any time to eat dinner. Okay, well, when you are depleting yourself of those basic necessities, like caring for your family, giving yourself nourishment, then that capacity to give to other people dwindles really quickly. And I am a firm believer that if you are not taking care of yourself and you're still trying to help other people, you're not really actually helping people, you're taking away, because you're still in that place of depletion. So you're not able to fully be present for that person. And not to say that every single day you're going to be fully present, but it's learning the power of no.
Like I always use the analogy of, there's a reason why on airplanes, right, they tell you always put your oxygen mask on first before helping others. And it's like, I always relate that to
I just was talking about that on my Instagram stories the other day, because my therapist gave me that word of advice when I was younger, and I was like, oh snap. Yeah, because if you can't breathe, how are you going to help other people breathe on the plane, right?
You mentioned the vulnerability and how it's so hard for us to be vulnerable. And I just wanted maybe to touch on that. And if you had tips for somebody who's maybe not used to, opening themselves up to society or just friends and loved ones, anything like that.
Yeah. So I was recently talking to somebody who I understand and acknowledge the word vulnerable is like not a lot of people want to hear that word. They don't want to. And when you think vulnerable, right, you think of like stripping down naked and like having the world look at you and observe you and judge you. But it's that, this conversation, this is a vulnerable conversation. Us sharing these things, that's vulnerability, of saying to you, like I just said, saying to your person, hey, I'm going to go through this struggle right now. Can you just bear with me as I go through that? Those are moments of vulnerability. And so I actually, somebody was telling me that she was like, I don't like that word vulnerable. I like heart-centeredness. And I was like, great. If that's what it means to be vulnerable to you, then use that phrase. I want to be heart-centered with you. And I was like, I absolutely love that. So maybe changing the word, shifting that word, what that definition of that word is, because truly vulnerability is that heart-centeredness, that opening of that self. So it's taking, again, those baby steps of like I said, acknowledging what happened after the fact and saying like, was that a heart-centered moment? Was I really honest with that person? No. Okay. Well, what could I do maybe in the future to be more vulnerable with that person? So it's just those baby steps of conversation, or really it's conversation of self. It's coming back to yourself and saying like, why do I feel this way? What's going on internally? and not pushing yourself to come up with an answer. I like to describe it as like we plant these seeds, right? And when you plant a garden, you plant seeds. You're not standing at the garden yelling it to grow, right? You know to water it, you know to put it in the sunlight, you know to walk away and then come back and you're like, oh shit, there's something growing. Yeah, just finding that connection, finding that person that you really trust. And I think starting with them, starting with the one person that you know is your ride or die, who's not going to be like, what are you doing? That's stupid. Like, who's not going to judge you for that and say, I'm on this path of opening myself up. Can you be my advocate on this? Can you be the person that's going to hold me accountable for this?
Oh, I couldn't have thought of a better answer. And I feel called to share that Neil was one of those people for me during that really hard time. And I mean, I was so vulnerable with him, and I just shared, I'm struggling with communication right now. He was so understanding, and he didn't give up on me. He just kept coming back, supporting me.
I'm like, I ain't going away. Sorry.
You're like, I don't care. I know you're going through stuff, but I'm here. And just, I left the whole community kind of behind, but he was one standout person who just never left. And I felt like, and at first I didn't want to be vulnerable with anyone. So just have those people. And it took me a while too. I was like, is he real? But he showed, and just, it showed me you have to let me, then I wouldn't be doing this podcast, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So just thank you. I think that will help a lot of people.
That's so beautiful too. And right, I'm sure he showed you that he was that kind of guiding force in your life without forcing it down, his perspective down your way. I'm sure he just checked in with you or did gentle things to remind you hey, I'm here. And it's also, when we're doing that for other people, it's doing that same thing for yourself. We are all just giant children walking around in adult bodies. And it's asking our kid self, hey, what do you need? What's going on? I'm just here. I'm going to go clean the dishes. If you need anything, just let me know. What I want is people to engage and start to become curious from the questions that I'm asking, and just put more thought and consideration into your day-to-day lives, that you don't have to bulldoze your way through life, that life isn't meant to be miserable and drudge, the drudgery of going to a 9-to-5. It's meant to enjoy life, and the more that we can do in baby steps, right? I'm always talking about baby steps. It's the baby steps. What can I do today that would be helpful? Saying no to that baseball game, saying yes to this cup of tea. Okay, great. If that's going to be your moment of peace and joy, then take that. And then the next day, do something different, or do the same thing, whatever works,
Yeah.
I love that phrase, the get curious.
And I think that's important also, which I like that you pointed that out, right? Because sometimes those moments of joy in an otherwise tough day can be something which might seem insignificant, like you said, like a cup of tea, right? But we can learn to find joy even in those smaller moments, right?
Yeah,
so
absolutely. That's where the magic is. And especially those of us who are perfectionists or people pleasers, we're like, oh my God, that wasn't good enough. I can't give myself any credit for that. Right. And it's just taking those moments that in your day-to-day life, did you get out of bed today? Hell yeah. Celebrate that. You chose to get out of bed when maybe you didn't feel like it. Right. Or maybe you, did a really good email at work. I don't know, celebrating something like that. It's those little things that we gather that make the big change, right? We can't just all of a sudden, I didn't all of a sudden go, okay, and cut my corporate job. It was 2 years of planning. So during that time, I had to celebrate, man, you really nailed that client session. Good for you. Congratulations. You took the time to learn more about, shame. Awesome. Oh, you got out of bed when you were really not feeling it so that you could meditate and take care of yourself. And that's also been a big part of my journey, is taking that time for myself, creating that ritual in the morning, because with the ritual, setting my timer for meditation, making myself some coffee, writing in my journal, taking that even sometimes just half an hour was the thing that helped me consistently show up for myself. And I always told myself I didn't have time. I hate getting up in the morning. So I created all these excuses to not do it. Till finally I was hurting so much in COVID that I was like, I have to do this. I have to do this. I have to. It was not would I like to, it was a deep need to do that for my survival.
Can you tell our viewers like all your information and where they can find you and where they can, seek out your help as like Tiana does?
Yeah. So I do a lot of work on Instagram. So I'm on Instagram as the_tender_hearted_healer. But my website is www.tenderheartedhealer.com. And I always encourage people to reach out and have a conversation with me first to establish, is this the right direction for you? Do you actually need this help? And two, how can I support you? Do you feel comfortable working with me? Do I feel comfortable working with you? Because I don't just open the doors willy-nilly to anyone. I really am very strongly affirmed in creating a very safe, cultivated circle of people who are ready to make this journey and ready to go on. So Tiana is part of my Connected Consciousness Accelerator program, which is my level 1 program, just introducing the concepts of vulnerability, of compassion, of trust for self, and taking those and really integrating them in so that when you continue your journey, I have a level 2 program, which is taking the heart-centeredness and then integrating that into your confidence and your warrior self. And then I also have one-on-one coaching for people who are like, nope, I don't want to work with a group. Great. You want to work just with me? Let's do it. So I have those 3 offerings for people to do that. And that's listed on my website. But I really encourage people to reach out on Instagram or email, which is thetenderheartedhealer@gmail.com, so that we can have that conversation.
Thank you so much for joining us today at Daily Wisdom Words. Thank you, Tara, the Tender-Hearted Healer, for coming on.
Be sure to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at all the links listed in the description. And don't forget to hit like on this video and subscribe to this channel so you never miss an episode. Thank you, everyone, once again, and we will see you right here next week at 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. Bye.